you think maybe 3 years of doing this tech stuff and I know exactly what I'm doing, but most days I have a tech team that manage all the behind the scenes of these calls. So I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. But thank you so much for inviting me. I love events like this because you get to hear other people's journeys and stories. And yeah, it would be awful now, wouldn't it, if I said, yeah, no, I don't have a business, so I don't know what I'm doing here. But unfortunately, I have quite a few most days. But I am the most hardworking person. Yes, but today I've had a day off, which is so rare. I decided to extend my Easter break and do something for myself for the day, which was lovely. But here I am. So a little bit about me. So if you can't tell from the accent, I'm from Wales, just over the bridge from that big city. We have some fans, fellow Welshies in the room, I think. But yeah, so I'm over the bridge and far away. But I spend a lot of my working week in London for a lot of my projects that I do, which will tell you that despite my diagnosis at the age of 23, I am a very busy human and I do work full time. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that and kind of what that looks like. But I was born with a muscle wasting disease. So I have Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. Nothing to do with sharks, nothing to do with teeth. It's actually the three French people who discovered the condition. So Professor Charcot, Professor Marie, and Professor Tooth. Bless the one at the end didn't have a very French name, did he? But apparently he was French. And I lived for 21 years of my life without knowing what my condition was. It was very evident from a young age that I had walking problems, balance problems. My mum never dressed me in dresses because I had so many cuts on my knees, and I fell all of the time. But nobody knew what it was. I had, very floppy muscles. I didn't have very strong joints. My joints would move, so hypermobile, and nobody really knew what that was. Until at the grand old age of 54, my dad was diagnosed by a Chinese rheumatologist that happened to have been doing a research paper on this very rare condition called Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. And she just knew from her physical assessment of him, she knew he had the condition. And my dad had lived 54 years with what was he was told was the effects of polio in the womb and rheumatoid arthritis. And it wasn't until a professor that was researching it found him and said, I know what your condition is, and it's definitely not what you've been living with for 54 years. The bad news is it's hereditary. Do you have any children? And I'm his sole child. And so my dad rings me from the hospital and says, look, I've got a bit of interesting news for you. I've been diagnosed with this condition. They say it's hereditary. It's 50-50 chance that you've got it. He started describing it to me, and I just knew I had Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. I was currently 16 weeks pregnant with my son. Remember, I said this was a hereditary condition, and it was a 50-50 chance. I had all of a sudden all these people swarming around me, genetic counsellors and different doctors to help me make a decision as to whether I wanted to continue my pregnancy. I was 20 at the time, nearly 21, and I'd lived a fairly decent life. It wasn't the most complicated of existences with the condition, and I just felt there was a lot worse that I could be bringing a child into the world with, and a lot that I could be unknown bringing a child into the world with. At least I knew what I was dealing with, so I continued with my pregnancy. And he was born, and 5 months later, I had the results of my genetic testing. Back at the turn of the millennium, they took a tube of blood this big, and they flew it all over the world. So Holland, Ireland, Belgium, to test it for the DNA they were looking for. So I've got an extra chromosome in my system, and that produces too much protein, which causes my nerve endings to degenerate. Well, that's all exciting and that's fascinating. But then how come I got to the point where literally less than 2 years later, I was being told I'd never work again? So I was very much brought up that you either work or you study. There's no excuse for not doing one or the other. And so I worked in the NHS from the age of 16, really. on and off for the first sort of couple of years of my working life. And when I was diagnosed with my condition, I was actually working in GP practice, and I'd worked my way up from holiday cover and temp receptionist to practice manager. So I was actually managing a practice at the time temporarily, and I was also trained to be a phlebotomist. A phlebotomist takes bloods, and they hold needles and stand on their feet all the time. Not the best kind of job for someone who has a muscle wasting condition in her arms and her legs. So it got to the point by the age of 23, I'd had two children, 19 months apart, and I couldn't work anymore. I couldn't stand for long periods of time, and I certainly couldn't hold a fine needle, and you definitely wouldn't want me holding it anywhere near you, because I just wasn't safe at my job. This was before the good old days of the Equality Act. There was such a thing as a Disability Discrimination Act, but nobody really cared about it. And I really had no rights because I had no idea what my rights were. And I think that's why it led me to the work that I do today as an activist and as a campaigner. So I was let go from my job, told, kind of I wasn't safe for what I was doing, which was fair enough. I wasn't. But nobody thought about making adjustments for me. Nobody thought about moving me into a career such as practice manager, which I'd already done, which I could do. They just got rid of me because I was a problem they didn't want to fix. The NHS very much works on the medical model of disability, which is you have a condition and that condition needs fixing. Whereas we all know now that as a group of people, we should live by the social model of disability, which says that actually me in my own way, I'm fine as I am. And if you make the world that I live in more accessible to me, I can function perfectly as I am. And so we didn't have that back then. We didn't have anything like it. But we did have disability employment advisors. So I'm 23. I have the rest of my life ahead of me. I have two children that I have to feed and clothe. And I rock up to the job centre to see a disabled employment advisor. And I said, I'd like a job, please. And the very words that came out of this guy's mouth was, listen, love, I think we need to face the reality here. Someone like you with your condition is never going to work again. And that was it. 23 years of age, I was given a social worker. I was given full disability benefits, which was even unheard of back then. I was given a house that was fully adaptable so that as my condition progressed, I would have the ability to use a wheelchair around my house. I had everything given to me, but one thing that I wasn't given was the opportunity to work. And that's all I wanted. I just wanted to work. I just wanted to contribute. I didn't want to become a government statistic. Not that I have any issue with being on benefit, and for many years I was. And it gave us, that lifeline that we needed for me to be able to find my feet again. But I believe that every one of us has the ability and the skills to contribute in society, whether that's through volunteering, paid work, through sharing knowledge and expertise. We all have something to give, but my opportunity was taken away from me by a group of people who felt that I wasn't able to contribute anymore. And I became that stigmatized disabled person. Thankfully, I have an amazing network of family and friends that just knew I was better than that. That's not to say that I didn't spiral into a very dark depression for 6 months, but it's amazing what having two children under the age of 2 does to motivate you every day, because they need you to get out of bed. They need you to clothe them. They need you to feed them. They need you to find a way, whatever happens, because they look to you for their example. And they were my saving grace, absolutely. So I started to look around at what I could do, how I could just keep my brain working, never mind the fact that my body didn't want to work. And I went back to university. So I went via the Open University. I did an access course and I studied the sociology of business. Don't even ask me what that means, because all I knew was I'd studied sociology at A level. There was a sociology entry aspect and the two seemed to make sense. I always believe that sometimes we have a sliding doors moment in life that allows us to choose a certain path, and that was certainly mine. Because then I found an absolute love for the world of business, and I went on to study my degree. I went on to study my postgraduate as well, and I just started to realise that actually this thing called business could work for me. I was naive enough at the time to think that I could work my business around my condition. And anyone who runs their own companies will tell you straight that usually the business runs you, you don't run your business. And I very much found out the hard way that if you want to grow a business and you want to create a big business, then it will own you, and it will own you every day of the week to get it to where it needs to be. And so fast forward, I started my own business when I was 30. And within 2 years, I had a nervous breakdown because I'm a shiny object collector as an entrepreneur. So I see an idea, I see a gap in the market, and I go after it. And I did that 10 times with 10 different companies in 2 years. And I completely burnt myself out. And it was my 33rd birthday. I had taken the day off because I was exhausted. And I was sat under the tree at a local like outdoor splash pool where we just chosen to take my kids on my 33rd birthday, looking out at the ocean because I live right on the coast in Wales. And I turned to my husband and I said, I just can't do this anymore. And for the first time in my life, it happened twice, he turned around and he said to me, well, don't then. And I never really thought that that was an option, to stop doing what I loved, but what had nearly killed me. So I did. I stopped running 10 companies. I sold 9 of them, and I kept my coaching business, which I absolutely loved. Because if there's one thing I love, is telling everybody else what to do and then not having to do it myself, which is business coaching, right? So I kept my coaching company. And then 3 years later, I got sepsis through a skin infection, and I nearly died. And it took me 8 months to recover from sepsis. And it was that in that time out, when you've kind of nearly faced that bright white light at the end of the tunnel, where you really value what's important and you question what you want to be doing with your life. And that's what I did. I went, do you know what? I'm an entrepreneur. I can do whatever I want to do. There is no rule. There's no set days that I have to work. There's no set life that I have to live. As long as I can exchange my knowledge, my skills, my time for money, or invent something that can do that, then I have a business. So I started to teach charities how to become more business minded, and I taught the business world how to be more community minded, and I loved it. And then I got the amazing opportunity to do a pilot piece of research, which was around the barriers disabled people face to becoming their own boss, their own business owner. And it was fascinating to me because I knew that my networks and my opportunities to build my networks were absolutely vital to me becoming a successful entrepreneur. And it was that led me to go after this seed funding. And in that seed funding, I found my business partner. In 2018, we started with 52 projects on a piece of paper that we were just going to change the disability world. We both had such a passion for the barriers that we discovered through that pilot project. Never mind the amount of barriers that disabled people face to starting their businesses, the amount of barriers they face to actually exist was shocking. And it led me to where I am now. So I set up Legacy in 2016 as the coaching and mentoring business. And then it evolved into a full disability organization in 2018. And last year I had my second mental breakdown. I took on 90 staff in a matter of weeks during the pandemic, and it completely blew my business apart. I had an opportunity to grow a project, and it was boom or bust, and it went bust. And I've learned so much from that opportunity. But what I decided to do was step down as the CEO of the charity, because it was no longer what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be an ops manager. I didn't want to be a HR person. I was missing chasing shiny objects. I was missing building strategy and developing marketing and branding and all of those things. So I spoke to my team and I said, look, I'm at breaking point and I really can't do this anymore. And for the second time in my life, somebody turned around and went, well, don't. And so I didn't. I stepped down as I retired from the charity. It's now a registered charity. I gave it over to my director of ops, who's now the managing director, and it is just flourishing. So it now focuses on helping disabled people wherever they are and whatever barriers they face to ensure they move beyond them, whether it's by creating advocacy, whether it's through creating opportunity, whether it's encouraging, coaching and mentoring people. That's what it does. And I now work with the corporate world to make sure that our business world becomes more accessible to disabled people. And I also run a support agency, which is think of a like a care agency, but it's support work for people who are in employment, people like me, who without the support workers, without my assistants in my day job, then I couldn't do my 40 to 60-hour weeks that I do, because my assistant is amazing and she does everything that I just can't or sometimes don't want to do. Um, and so, yeah, I've had a really interesting journey so far. I think I'm at the verge where I'm ready to semi-retire. That simply means for me that I don't want to get out of bed every morning to have to keep putting a roof over my head. I want to get out of bed just because I can change the world one step at a time and not have to worry about my financial situation. So I have to be really conscious right now that my future, I'm currently a part-time wheelchair user. So anything over distance or standing, I have to use a chair. My condition and my prognosis is that I will become extremely weak and unable to physically do things as my life progresses. So I want a comfortable life ahead of me, but I'll never stop doing what I do because I absolutely love it. And even if I didn't ever get paid again for doing it, I still do it every single day because it is exactly what Julia and Andrea were saying before we got on this call. You know, not everyone has someone behind them that will support them to get to where they want to be. But I tell you what, I'll do it. I'll get behind you and I'll support you every step of the way for whatever you want to achieve, because people did it for me and look at where I am now. And I'm not turning 40, I'm even turning 42. But thanks for that, Scott. I'll take the 2 years. I'll give it back to you now, Scott.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sara. So